am writing this under an appreciable mental strain, since by tonight I shall be no more. Penniless, and at the end of my supply of the drug which alone makes life endurable, I can bear the torture no longer, and shall cast myself from this garret window into the squalid street below. Do not think from my slavery to morphine that I am a weakling or a degenerate. When you have It was in one of the most open and least frequented parts of the broad Pacific that the packet of which I was supercargo fell a victim to the German sea raider. The Great War was then at its very beginning, and the ocean forces of the Hun had not completely sunk to their later degradation. So that our So liberal, indeed, was the discipline of our captors, that 5 days after we were taken, I managed to escape alone. When I finally found myself adrift and free, I had but little idea of my surroundings. Never a of the lot. The weather kept fair, and for uncounted days I drifted aimlessly beneath the scorching sun, waiting either for some passing ship or to be cast on the shores of some habitable land. But neither ship. The change happened whilst I slept. Its detail for my slumber, though troubled and dream-infested. When at last I awoke, it was to discover myself half sucked into a slimy expanse of hell, and in which my boat lay grounded some distance away. Though one might well imagine that my first sensation would be of wonder at so prodigious and unexpected a transformation of scenery, I was in reality more, for there was in the air and in the rotting soil a sinister quality which chilled me to the very core. The region was putrid with the carcasses of decaying fish, and of other, less describable things which I saw protruding from the nasty mud of the unending plain. Perhaps I should not hope to convey in mere words the unutterable hideousness that can dwell in absolute silence and barren immensity. There was nothing within hearing and nothing in sight save a vast reach of black slime. Yet the very completeness of the stillness and the homogeneity of the landscape oppressed me with a nauseating fear. The sun was blazing. As I crawled into the stranded boat, I realized that only one theory could explain my position. So great was the extent, nor were For several hours I sat thinking or brooding in the boat, which lay upon its side and afforded a slight shade as the sun moved across the heavens. As the day progressed, the ground lost some of its stickiness and seemed likely to dry sufficiently for traveling purposes in a short time. That night I slept but little, and the next day I made for myself a pack containing food and water, preparatory to On the third morning, I found the soil dry enough to walk upon with ease. The odor of the fish was maddening, but I was too much concerned with graver things to mind so slight an evil, and set out boldly for an unknown goal. All day I forged steadily westward, guided by a faraway hummock which rose higher than any other elevation on the rolling desert. That night, I encamped, and on the following day still travelled toward the hummock, though that object seemed scarcely nearer than when I had first espied it. By the fourth evening, I attained the base of the mound, which turned out to be much higher than it had appeared from a distance. An intervened 2 weeks. I know not why my dreams were so wild that night, but ere I was awake in a cold perspiration, determined to sleep no. Such visions as I had experienced, and in the glow of the moon I saw how, without the glare of the parching sun, my journey would have cost me less energy. Indeed, I now felt quite able to perform the ascent which had deterred. I have said that the unbroken monotony of the rolling plain was a source of vague horror to me, but I think whose black recesses the moon had not yet soared high enough to illumine. I felt myself on the edge of the world, peering over the rim into a fathomless chaos of eternal night. Through my terror ran curious reminiscences of Paradise Lost, and of Satan's hideous climb through the unfashioned realms of darkness. As the moon climbed higher in the sky, I began to see that the slopes of the valley were not quite so perpendicular. Ledges and outcroppings of rock afforded fairly easy footholds for a descent, whilst after a drop of only a few hundred urged on by an impulse which I cannot definitely analyze, gaze all and up that it was but for despite its whose the moon, now near the zenith, shone weirdly and vividly above the towering steeps that hemmed in the chasm, and revealed the fact that a far-flung body of water flowed at the bottom, winding out of sight in both across on whose the writing was in a system of hieroglyphics unknown to me and unlike anything I'd ever seen in books, consisting for the most part of conventionalized aquatic symbols such as fishes, eels. Several characters obviously represented marine things which are unknown to the modern world, but whose it was the plainly visible across the intervening water on account of their enormous size. Though the creatures were shown disporting like fishes in the waters of some marine grotto, or paying of their faces and form for the mere remember, grotesque beyond the imagination of a Poe or a Bulwer. They were glassy, bulging eyes. Curiously enough, they seemed, for one of the creatures was shown in the act of killing a whale, represented as but little larger than himself. I remarked, as I say, their grotesque, but in some tribe whose last descendant had awestruck. I stood with only a slight churning to mark its rise to the surface. The thing slid into view above the dark waters. Loathsome, it darted like a stupendous monster of nightmares to the marlin, about which it flung its gigantic scaly arms, while it bowed its hideous head and gave vent to certain measured sounds. I think I went mad then. Of my frantic ascent of the slope and cliff. I believe I sang a great deal, and I have indistinct When I came out of the shadows, I was in a San Francisco hospital. Brought thither by the captain of the American ship which had picked up my boat in mid-ocean. In my delirium, I had said much, but found that my words had been given scant attention. Nor once I sought out a celebrated ethnologist. and amused. But soon perceived. It is at night, especially when I try, but the drug has given. So often, a mere freak of fever, as I lay sun-stricken and raving in the open boat after my escape from the German man-of-war. This I ask myself, but I cannot think of the deep sea without shuddering at the nameless things that may at this very moment be crawling and floundering on its slimy bed, worshipping their ancient stone idols and carving their own detestable likenesses on submarine obelisks of water-soaked granite. I dream of a day when they may, of a day when the land shall sink and the dark ocean shall ascend amidst universal pandemonium. The end is near. I hear a noise at the door, as of some immense slippery body lumbering against it. It shall not find me. God, that hand! The window! The window!